Story 1. Because my parents were in love and they wanted to have someone they could put all their love into, I was born. They still had so much love to give, so I have two other siblings. They raised all three of us by filling us with love. Even though they weren't perfect, they always communicated their love for us. Story 2. My God. Not a single comment yet on two people getting married and wanting to start a family. Guess I'll be the first apparently wanted child in this thread. Story 3. My parents wanted 3 kids and had them. I was the third. They were not always the best parents, but I cannot really complain, and they always tried their best. Story 4. After giving birth to my sister at 17, my mother either misunderstood or was given the wrong advice about birth control. She was told that she couldn't get pregnant while breastfeeding, but that's an oversimplification of how that works. Anyway, my birthday was 10 days before my sister's first. Story 5. My mom says Dad tricked her by saying he was making her safe with the pull-out method, but in reality he knew what he was doing. I asked Dad, and he confirmed it's true and was laughing. If you ask me, that's morbid, baby trapping someone on purpose plus her forgiving. He did the same thing with my siblings too. Story 6. A blessing for some and a curse for others. I couldn't tell you why I was born, but I have a list of what I wasn't born for, which includes not doing what others want me to do. Oh, and not being someone's servant. Nope, wasn't born to serve you. Story 7. My dad took his girlfriend, my mother, to a concert, and he owned a van. I discovered this when I tried to track down a specific tour shirt from a specific band to give as a birthday gift for my mother. The dates and circumstances line up a bit too perfectly to be a coincidence. Story 8. Because my father wanted a child and my mother did not want a child. Fast forward 9 years and 10 months later, my father died, and my mother was stuck with me, making my life a living hell. Story 9. Parents wanted to raise a holy child for their God. To everyone's dismay, the child wasn't terribly interested in being a holy man, and much ado about nothing ensued. Story 10. My mom had just divorced after her husband left her with 2 children. She was anxious about whether she'd ever meet anyone again, since getting a divorce and having children was not viewed positively back then. My dad was married but didn't have any children, a situation that had really started to upset him. They met in a bar and suddenly they made me. Story 11. My mom gave my dad a birthday gift of going off the birth control pill. I was born 11 months later. She didn't want kids, so I'm sure you can guess what kind of mommy issues I came out with. Thanks. Story 12. My parents, being in their late 30s and early 40s, wanted a child, so they had me. Then they wanted me to have a brother, so they had a second son. My dad must have made a mistake because we know for a fact that my sister was not planned. Funnily enough, my mother experienced a cryptic pregnancy with my sister. She did not know she was pregnant until the day my sister was born. It was completely invisible to everyone, and she was working regular hours until she went to the hospital for a stomach ache and gave birth. Story 13. My dad was a big party guy. Not as in he liked to party, but he used to have huge parties. He was just about 40 with a 17-year-old son and had been happily divorced for most of those 17 years. He built a house on some acreage with a full bar, a regulation billiards table, a satellite dish setup, and a separate driveway to a field for parking. The place was literally built for having parties. It was spring in the early 1980s and he was having a hog roast. My mom was newly divorced and just old enough to drink. She got married to get away from her family in high school, and that fizzled. She wanted to party and heard about a guy who throws great parties. They met, got along like a house on fire, and before long took a honeymoon with a baby on the way. Story 14. Because my parents met at a pizza place where my dad kept ordering the same awful anchovy pizza just to talk to my mom, who was the waitress. 3 years later, here I came. Story 15. I came from a revenge booty call. Exact words from my biological father. He was getting back at my family, my mother's husband and mother's brother, for messing around with his wife. So he got with my mother, or so he said. Story 16. Pure luck. My mom has told me that she was on the pill when I was conceived and kept taking it, hoping she would have a miscarriage. That was a fun talk. Story 17. I was wanted. second child and first daughter. Then my mom realized I wasn't going to live up to the image she had in her head of the perfect daughter. She had another go and got the one she really wanted. I'm 41 and still feeling the effects. Story 18. I cannot answer that, but apparently, I was such a good, lovable baby that my mother decided a second one would not be a bad idea. Needless to say, she had her tubes tied after my sister. Story 19. I'm the third child from a marriage that should have ended after the first child, about 8 years before I was born. Honestly, my parents should never have gotten married at all, but they divorced when I was 7, and it made everyone's life better. Story 20. Because my dad did not pull out in time, if he had, I would have been a stain in the sheets. Well, the real reason is he wanted a boy after 2 girls. Story 21. My father couldn't pull out in time, and they had no money for an abortion. Also, they wanted a girl since they already had the son they wanted. Oh, don't forget my environment. Oh, what fun. I was told I was stupid. After a while, they warmed up to me. I learned a lot about myself from all this. Story 22. Well, my grandfather was supposed to go to sea as a young man, as he had gotten a job on a ship. But he broke his leg and couldn't go. He met my grandmother a few months later. Story 23. Because my brother was a fertility drug baby, my parents thought they would not conceive a second time very quickly. So they used no birth control, and then I showed up 22 months after him. Story 24. I was unwanted. My mom had just had a baby, and my parents made a mistake. Me. I was born 11 months after my sister. The central theme of my childhood was that I was unwanted. Story 25. I honestly believe I was an oops baby. My mother and father had my older brother, and at some point she went to make an appointment to tie her tubes and found out she was pregnant with me. As soon as it was deemed safe for her after I was born, she got her procedure done. Considering the rampant favoritism for my brother, I really think I was a mistake. Story 26. I was conceived in a supply closet at the Rutherford Appleton Laboratory by 2 passionate nerds in love. Apparently, the code was compiling, so they decided to do some compiling of their own. Needless to say, I grew up to be a massive nerd myself. Story 27. The depression here is thick. I'm here with you. I don't know why I exist, but I know my mom filled me with love, and my father filled me with hate. Forget you, Dad. Story 28. Because back in the day, at a certain age, getting married and having kids was a sign of success, and it was just what you did. Both parents grew up in big families and a religion that praised getting married fairly young and having kids. I was loved and cared for along with my siblings, but I am single and childless, and I still consider myself successful. I am just not one who desires getting married at this time, and kids just aren't in the cards right now or ever. Who knows? My parents were very adamant that getting married and having children were our options and not expected. We are taught to make our own opinions and choices. Story 29. According to my mother, my dad was drunk that night and forced her. So that made it my fault she remained in an unhappy marriage. Thanks for the memories, Mom. Story 30. Because my father had a plan, boy first, girl second. He succeeded exactly according to plan. I've never seen the man fail when he put his mind to something. Story 31. Dad wanted a kid. Mom did not. My childhood suffered tremendously due to that. To this day, the social stigma that dads are more likely to be the deadbeats and moms are inherently angels hurts me because I can personally assure you moms are just as capable of being horrible to their children in many ways. Story 32. Upper middle class mom wanted to really stick it to her parents and prove she was in love with the country boy from the next town over. Parents divorced before I turned 1. Story 33. A long time ago, in a bedroom far, far away, a man and a woman who liked each other a whole lot decided to hold hands. Eventually, they did more than that, and their love brought them closer together. And then a stork came along and delivered me. Story 34. I protested in the strongest possible terms, but alas, my objections fell on deaf ears. Beyond that, I don't have an answer. I've been pondering the what's, whys, and what the F***s ever since. Story 35. My mother decided as a teenager that she would have a daughter, and she would name her what she named me. She met my father when she was a sophomore in high school and he had just graduated. They married a year after she graduated. I'm an only child by her choice. She and my father died a few years ago. Since then, I have wondered whether being someone's child is like being married. Is it until death do you part? She was a good mother, but my identity is all wrapped up in being her daughter. I'm trying to figure out who I am and what matters to me, now that I'm no one's daughter any longer. Story 36. As a surprise to my parents, who were both told they were infertile, my mom had my brother, and my dad fathered two more of my brothers with my stepmom. Not so infertile now, are they? Laughing out loud. Story 37. To give two kids a far better childhood and early life experiences to make them better humans than what I was set up to be. I simply believed I could do better and overcome a bad 10 years. So I did. Many other people can't, so I have some empathy and compassion for people whose parents did not set them up for success. Story 38. My mother wanted two children, and my father wanted a daughter. So there was my older brother, me, and then the divorce. At least I was highly wanted. Story 39. I was born to answer thought-provoking questions like, why was I born? I was also born to use my own suffering through addiction to enrich the lives of others. Story 40. Honestly, I never asked. I'm pretty sure I was planned, so I always just assumed mom and dad decided they wanted a family. They started trying, and then I was lucky enough to be the product of that decision. I think they made a good choice. Life isn't perfect, but it's pretty neat, and I'm very grateful for the experience. Story 41. Most of my life, my mother has told her fun little anecdote that I am proof of how antibiotics lower the effectiveness of birth control pills. It always makes me feel warm and fuzzy when she alludes to the fact that I was an unplanned mistake and, in fact, not wanted. I'm sure my golden child older sibling was conceived in the same manner, but they always acted like they wanted them, and since I was a mistake, I am significantly younger than them. The custody battle in the divorce was super fun since they never argued over who got to keep me, but who had to keep me. Story 42. Two people, one recovering from a breakup after approximately 10 years of marriage and having a child, and the other after approximately 5 years in an unsuccessful relationship, reminded themselves about meeting each other at my uncle's wedding around 7 to 8 years earlier. My aunt is my mother's friend from high school. They decided that they wanted a child, and since they considered themselves to be getting older, it was a now or never decision. Story 43. My parents were Catholic. My mom put her foot down after 4 kids as she just couldn't handle the physical, emotional, and financial stress of having more. She started birth control. This was the early 1970s, and her friends and my dad told her she would be excommunicated. Story 44. My wife and her older sister were both born 9 months after their father's birthday. I don't think they've ever noticed, and I'll never be the one to tell them. Math can be a terrible thing. Story 45. Because my parents made reckless decisions and ended up getting pregnant twice by mistake. My dad wanted to abort me, but my mom refused, so now I have to live a life I didn't ask for. Story 46. Well, when a mommy loves a daddy, my parents are married. My mom wanted 6 kids, but my dad was an active Marine, and my grandma refused to help babysit if they had any more kids, so they stopped at 4. I'm number 3. Story 47. My dad met my mom when he was in his late 40s, and she was in her 30s and had never been married before, so he probably thought this was his last chance to have a child of his own. He probably regretted that decision from time to time. Story 48. Birthday in September. That is 9 months after New Year's. I am starting to wonder if I was a New Year's accident or a New Year's miracle. To be determined. Story 49. I was an unexpected prize from a night of lust. There are 5 years between my next older sibling and me. Pretty sure I was a showstopper for my poor old folks who were beginning to dream of an empty nest in the not-too-distant future. Story 50. I am the product of assumed infertility. My parents moved away from everyone to have a nice life after being told they had no chance of having kids. They bought a 1-bedroom apartment and a 2-seater sports car. 6 months later, they found out about me. Story 51. Because it is easier to train and brainwash a child that is dependent upon you since birth than it is to brainwash and train an adult who would have to be retrained and isn't dependent upon you for survival. Story 52. Because my parents are selfish, insecure, irresponsible people who see children as an extension of themselves or a total burden or both. I was an accidental pregnancy. My mother used to laugh about it out loud to my face and to others and thought it was so cute. The never-ending story of how my older and only full sibling wanted to be an only child and hated me as soon as I was born is her favorite story to tell anyone who will listen. Anyway, hope she's well. Hope her other child is well. I'm fine. Live 7 minutes from my mom and haven't seen her in maybe 8 months. Thank God. Story 53. It had been 6 years since my sister was born. My parents had to save up to have children, so they left 6 years between each child. My brother is 12 years older than me. Our parents were amazing, hardworking, and loving. Story 54. My mom changed her mind 180 degrees and went from not wanting kids to wanting to. If she were still alive, I would love to chat with her about this because I was the same way. I always thought my genes were bad. Story 55. I was a surprise and was never supposed to exist. Mom was in a car accident and miscarried. The injuries were bad enough to where the doctor told her she wouldn't be able to have any more kids. My parents were relieved because they didn't want any more kids after that. A year later, she was pregnant with me. Fate wanted me on this planet for some reason.